Hello hero, it's Lucy Lannon. It's good to see you. You've seen the title, so at this stage you know more about today's reading than I do, since I speak to you from the recent alternate past. This is a general, timeless one, ideally designed for quite a large audience, so we won't get as specific as we would in a private booking, link down below. If most of what I'm saying feels like an answer to a question you've been living, take those tidbits with you and let a fellow traveller excavate the rest. If it's not your reading, there are playlists on my channel hub to randomise finding something else. Whilst it's true that a broken clock is right twice a day, I'm not sure that same clock is right 10 times within the hour. So trust yourself, above all, to know what's useful for you and what makes you feel more empowered for hearing it, no matter what your beliefs. While we're on beliefs, on this channel gendered terms are just a specificity of language to describe energetic tendencies and signatures, solar or lunar inclination in accordance with a hermetic law of polarity, and not any kind of socialisation to buy into wholesale or conflate with the identity or orientation of anyone described. Romantic and spiritual labels used are plucked from lengthy precedent predating any unfortunate trending controversies or engineered cyclical backlash. My dude, around these parts, we don't relinquish the complexity of our full histories. We trust ourselves cognitively to adapt what we consume and see what's healthy and long-term accurate. I'm legally obliged to say this is entertainment in quote marks and that I'm an occultist not qualified in unrelated disciplines to advise on physical and mental health, finances, legalities. You get the picture, you're in charge of you. All my readings are protected and warded by frankly magnificent beneficial forces, though I don't share my custom prep rituals on camera any more than I give out my address. I hope the reasoning behind that is obvious, but you can trust there are zero parasitic or adversarial influences permitted within 100 unseen paces of any signal we patch from the noise here today. So sit back, relax into the shape of your most luminous possible future self, cozy up to imaginal allies, and take in whatever it is you need to hear. If you do like it, this small channel with a big mission very much appreciates subscriptions, thoughtful comments, or donations in order to spread the word and keep the lights on. Now, let's tune that dial. Okay, let's just check we're recording. We are. I want to say that this is going to be a kind of magical identity reading or a spiritual identity reading. So if those things don't quite hit, this might not be the one for you. Please feel free to check out the channel playlist, okay? This may also have to do with some qualities in yourself that you're not quite proud of, or some stuff from your past socially, in particular, which may need leaving behind. So again, kind of trigger warning for both of those things. I'm also, so playlist in the background, we're back to using music on the channel. Hopefully, I don't regret that, copyright-wise and everything, but this particular playlist is called Flesh Wound Armani and the Deathglow Dolmahor. It's my sort of ode to Tarantino-esque musical choices without using any of the ones he uses. I say that both so that you can find it if you enjoy it, but also because there might be something in that, in kind of playing the anti-hero and acknowledging yourself as a kind of narrative mixed bag character, if indeed we're taking a magical lens at the characters we're playing in the movie universe of our lives, if that makes sense. So if you're very like law of assumption, manifest, etc., that's probably the magical paradigm we're referring to. But there is broader scope for other things because we've got astrology cards, we've got fallen angel oracle cards, and then we've also got the Vertigo tarot, which for me is my heavily magical deck. We're also working with Tiger's Eye on the one hand, which speaks to me of like material abundance and stability and stuff, but also it's very Leonic, so it fits in with this question of will over this end. And then my Moldavite over the other, which, I mean, many know the reputation of Moldavite kind of precedes it, right? It's it tends to be a kind of a tower card in the form of a crystal, but it's also something that virally people are carrying around kind of online and elsewhere in order to bring about those kinds of changes when they are very necessary for the soul's growth. So, like, yes, it has all these wonderful other qualities, but what I'm getting for this particular reading is the sort of reasoning that of why the Moldavite's reputation precedes it, in that in that something is needed to be like force grown here. Emphasis on the word force and its kind of dual meaning. I hope this is making sense so far. Okay, so we have truthfully I am who I am because of you, and there's a contract that's been made here. I don't know what with or who with, but I started out wearing my like twin flame ring for this reading, and then it became really uncomfortable, so I had to let go of it. There's something in that as well about material excesses or material outward signifiers of inward material states. So for some of you, read, are you comfortable showing abundance to the outside world? For others of you, if you've been doing talismanic magic, there is like a removal from that or a stepping back, an objectivity that's happening with it. We're taking off the ring, we're putting it down. There was something on that as well in terms of like the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, of like taking off the one ring because obviously it can kind of push one in one direction or the other in terms of your own acceleration towards a certain kind of morality or a certain lust for power or whatever. And I'm not saying that's going on, but what I am saying is that if you've been wearing something like the Moldavite, like the ring, to accelerate progress further, to aid in your awakening or something kind of your ascension, if you like, to use the more new age parlance for it, then perhaps that tool for acceleration is actually a little bit much at the minute, and we need to take it off and take a step back, right? Which brings me to the fact that, just kind of touching on the colour reading, this is a red neon, so this is boop, boop, go no further, go no further. As spoken about many times on the channel, this is my Danger Robinson family kind of colour. It's also Tom Waits in The Fisher King as the kind of vet that shows people who or what they could become, and is kind of a dark mirror of society in how they react towards him. I'll try and put a clip of that down below, but if you haven't seen The Fisher King and you are of a magical ilk, I highly recommend it. It's a very dense film. But with it being a neon as well, there's some kind of stuff coming in here from whatever you work with, but for me, I would say specifically the Archangelic, particularly because we got fallen angel cards anyway. And I'm now hearing Freelance Fiend by Leafhound, which for some of you, like, you're like, oh, narrow down what I'm working with, because you're working with a lot, and it's something to do with like intake of psychedelics, psychotropics, something which may have leaves, right? Any kind of mind-altering things grown or produced that you use in your common practice. I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a person who does that, but I acknowledge it in a kind of shamanic sense. And it, to narrow down like who we're referring to with whoever's saying, hey, put the brakes on right now and listen. Stop collaborating, listen, right? Whoever your stop collaborating listen is in terms of who or what you work with, it might be connected to the herb or to herbs or to substances which take you on a journey, you know, and that could be as kind of deep a journey as you want to go. I know some of you are only speaking in that sense of like a herbal tea before bed. Others of you are like going on a full pilgrimage to the Amazon, taking all sorts of stuff through all kinds of weird cool means. So you do you, boo. Let me know in the comments what you're up to. I'm very intrigued by this, because this is definitely, like I say, you don't have to be a magical practitioner. This could be a spiritual reading, but it's giving a lot of that energy. And already, like the song that's on, you know, I'm feeling the strut, I'm feeling the sort of protagonist anti-hero vibe, which is a much stronger energy coming from you than we perhaps normally get for the collective energy on this channel. Not to say that it's better or worse, but it's just like a more, it's an identity that knows itself a little bit more, is a little more cocksure, is a little more wiggle in the walk, a bit of swagger with you in that sort of John Constantine way. And that makes me think, yeah, there's some kind of magical history to this if you're stumbling on it. So hail and welcome if you're new. Okay, we're going to split from here. And we're going to split is also really appropriate to the musical choices today. So that might be something you say, or there's just that kind of vibe of like, I don't know, like I'm getting, again, an anti-hero leaning against a wall, kind of chewing on a toothpick, being like, let's split, you know? Like, it's very, yeah. Anyway, And we've already mentioned Tom Waits, so that follows as well. Hit me up if you do love him or you like that kind of energy. There's a Tom Waits, John Constantine, Winston Wolfe imprint coming through this that I really appreciate, and that's what I'm trying to say in a long-winded way. So we have Vapula in charge of our command and Stolas in charge of our recuperation. The numbers 59 or 69 might be relevant in some way, or the separation of 10 and the number 10 may be relevant to practice, particularly for those of you of a Kabbalistic ilk, right? But we're all sorts here. So I'm going to go with recuperation first because it's actually less complicated than this side for reasons that may be obvious. So Leo in reverse, or I will in reverse, speaks to me of a misdirection of will or a misdirected ability to direct the will, what a handful or a mouthful that is. And we've got underdog playing in the background, right? Which is absolute anthem for anybody, right? But it's this thing of, I mean, it begins as Vajaka and then becomes underdog. So there's a kind of, I was one thing and now I'm becoming another. But there's also like a difficulty in managing energy through that process. So again, ascension, awakening, acceleration of who it was that you used to be. But I will in reverse is like, you know what your intent is as a magician, or as a manifestor or whatever it is. But it's like getting that out there in that Leonic kingly way. It's almost like the crown's been knocked off a little bit by the process, hence the anti-hero vibe. And the light's just gone out, right? You may feel that your light's gone out in some sense. I'm not going to fiddle with that to put it back on, but there is that sort of... this song always makes me think of like Muhammad Ali or someone. So there's like a lot of bravado here, but then there's also like a sort of dethroning of that energy, which may make you feel like you used to be much more successful in your practical kind of results magic, you know, be that spell work or be that something else of a more right-hand spiritual ilk, shall we say. So I will it, but it doesn't become, or I have trouble directing the will. And I feel that that's because you do need to recuperate. You need to... Maybe there's a fear here because of the owl of becoming an armchair magician, having kind of been that way for a long time and then gone into practice, right? It's almost like if I take a rest, I'll just be back to reading my books and not actually doing any of it, not actually living. For some of you, if you struggle with the label witch because you feel that it's a verb, as I do, and that it's been kind of misappropriated culturally by people who aren't doing witch, they're saying or being witch, right? You might have a struggle with taking a step back from practice, as we've sort of expressed here, to rest, to recuperate, to gain back the sort of skill set, or even to go through cyclical phase stuff, because we've got the moon here, without feeling that you're just kind of putting the books down again. There's some kind of self-concept here about like, if you take a break, you were just pretending with the whole thing. Or the magical community will see you that way, or you'll start to feel like you lose the momentum of will by taking a rest. But that is what you're being directed to do, right? Particularly if you work with Stolas at all. Then we've got let's build our own family, let's be our own support. Part of this self-reliant, sometimes jubilant, sometimes antagonistic energy that's coming through with both the playlist selection and the rest of the cards is like the autonomy of the true magician, the advanced magician, the person who's been doing this a while, who can just kind of come up with it at street level, throw some things together, get in touch with higher contacts that they've been building relationships with for years, and just get shit done, magically speaking, whether that's results wise or in a kind of what some people would see as a more ascended way. And again, you do you, because for me on this channel, I don't particularly discriminate against results magic, but I know some people are a bit like weird about that. But let's just say there is like an acknowledgement that you need to be your own support in order to qualify yourself as the magical being that you want to be. And now the song is Tammy Terrell, All I Do Is Think About You, which is an absolute banger, but it's also like all you do is think about this identity of who it is that you will be kind of as your highest self or at your spiritual best. And there is a calling here to maybe not drop the idea, but expand it a little bit, relax it a little bit. Appreciate that everybody on their magical journey has rest periods, because there is such a thing as spiritual burnout, right? There is such a thing as putting too much in energetically for a long time, particularly when you're consistently directing a solo will towards a big project. For some of you, you're doing like an elongated ritual. I mean, you won't be doing an abramelin if you're watching me on digital, but something like that takes a lot of, talismanic input, additional information and rededication over time. You might be working with a deity or entity that requires that kind of thing of you, that's like constantly energetically having new demands each time you check in. And the encouragement here is that between checkpoints of that particular relationship, yes, we don't want to break contract, right? Because that was suggested by this ring. But also, like, make sure you're resting enough that you have the energy in the bank to do that. Because there is a very real concern here about not having enough in the battery to continue building a relationship with something that is energetically self-sustaining in a way that doesn't quite necessarily either understand or appreciate the position of mortality, right? Let's build our own family speaks to that, speaks to energetic contracts being reinforced again and again, a relationship with a particular thing being built. It could be a personal servitor, it could be all the way to like an ancient deity. You do you. I'd love to know in the comments, by the way. But there is some kind of, again, it's very demanding, it's very repeating. It's, to tell you the truth, although I refer to this song as a banger, I sometimes skip over it because it feels like it sort of cycles over the same musical things a little more than some of the other stuff on the list. And it belongs here, but it's also like a repetitive process some of the days that I'm working on it. And that's kind of the vibe I'm getting from this, right? Is that on some days you're like, yes, this ritual is Tammy Tyrell, or Tammy Tyrell, I'm not really sure which it is. Tyrell Corp may be relevant because of the owl as well. But it's like, some days you're like, yes, this is an absolute banger. This is the song that makes it such this kind of a thing. And then other days you kind of can't wait to skip and make it Pinot D'Angio, which is coming on now. Excuse me. And it's that feeling of like, some days you're really into it. Some days you cannot wait for the end result. Some days you are just delighted to be living in the ritual, doing your kind of BG strut while this kind of stuff's on in the background. Again, as with the last reading, everything's coming up Millhouse kind of energy. But other times it's just repetitive and exhausting. And this is your call from spirit, right? From your own guides, from your own team, be they guides, goddesses, servitors, fictional people, whatever. Take a pause when a pause is given. Actually take it, actually have some time out, stop traveling, stop working magic, stop doing, and just fucking chill for a minute, because otherwise we're going to have this Leonic will directed into a kind of Shadow King energy where you're a bit burnt out, so you're going to be a bit of a bossy boots, to put it kindly, right? You're going to be maybe a bit, if you're coming across in a magical contract to another being a certain way, you want to make sure that you're well rested enough for that to be a good positive impression, and for you to have your wits about you in terms of things like folkloric rules or certain laws built into a process. And my feeling is that actually if you don't rest at this time or at the next given opportunity, not only will you not build this family or this alliance with whatever it is that you've been working with, but you might give off like shadow fire sign bullshit, right? And you don't want to do that, and you don't want to break the rules, and you don't want to go back on any hard work that you have done. You don't want to, if this has been like a very right hand path thing, you don't want to go back on any kind of ascension progress that you've made, or any progress towards like a more sort of humble version of enlightenment. And then if this is really left hand, which again, all are welcome, you don't want to let like being the god force in your own energy make you this kind of shadow gnostic god because you're just tired and cranky. That is not enough of a good solid factor to direct your character arc into villainous territory in this lifetime and those beyond, right? It's just not worth it. You don't want to be like bad Jafar just because you didn't get enough sleep and eat your Weetabix this morning. And that's kind of, in a magical sense, that's what's coming across with this. And when I first picked Embracing Nature at this side, I don't know whether you saw, but it was in reverse. So I thought like, oh, maybe you're not spending enough time outside in nature, recuperating, etc., because we got this as well. And that may be true, but there's also more to that we'll get back to when we get to this side, because it was very much like there's a middle pillar here, which again may be relevant, right? But then there is like two kingdoms of energy, if you like, directed by these, helpfully weighing in. So tarot-wise on this side, we've got a Three of Cups with the Justice reversed, with the Death reversed. Something socially has happened with you in your perhaps mundane life, or like, I mean, it maybe could be like coven-based or whatever, but my feeling is that it's more friend to friend, or it's more like niggling on your energy, so you're actually close to these people. But anyway, there's been some kind of group or social miscarriage of justice, or some kind of, perhaps a contract you had in the very real world with, real, you know, how do you define real, you know what I mean? But in the mundane, in the human world, as opposed to the extra human, there's been a kind of betrayal or a kind of sneakiness or some kind of input from a friend or a coven member or something that has meant that justice has not been done in a very obvious, very overt way, because notice these are the only majors. And that is bringing about some kind of resistance in you to letting a particular issue go. Now, the resistance may be to letting this go, right? What's the name of this song? It's perfect for it. But the initial, excuse me, hiccups. It is, yeah, we're agreed, right? Sorry, that's my confirmation signal if you've never been in before. Monkey see, monkey do is the way that this song opens, right? Stay away, that's the song, stay away. So maybe someone you want to stay away from. But monkey see, monkey do is interesting because it's almost like something happened because someone in your circle was imitating somebody else that was not having such great behaviour. I don't feel that that was you, even if they are a copycat figure. I feel like they may be in the habit of imitating other people. And because this monkey see, monkey do, it's like they tried to do something that someone else was doing, and it meant that something unjust was happening. Another narrative that I'm getting, if it wasn't that like they copied someone and it led to this thing that's like really shit, and you don't want to let that go, right? Because this feels like it's you not wanting to let this circumstance, this kind of Aggie thing go. The other thing I'm getting is like the Constantine mythology with him and Newcastle and like ritual regret and that sort of stuff. And maybe monkey see, monkey do, referring to somebody who's maybe not a magical adept, who's maybe sort of starting out towards apprentice level, or they're just kind of re-dipping into the waters after a long break or something. And you want to do a working as a group, and they're like, yeah, I'm totally ready for that. I'll carry my weight by doing this bit. And then they've kind of gone monkey see, monkey do to something that's a little bit outside of their realm of expertise, or a little bit beyond their particular extent of development, in order to imitate somebody else either in the group or that they look up to. And the magical result of that has sort of gone haywire because they weren't up to the task, right? They didn't have, ironically, for what we were just saying with you, they didn't have enough energy necessarily to carry out this thing in full, or as it's kind of done when one has more magical experience, when one can protect oneself better, when one can move through certain zones with a bit more ease or a bit more savvy, if we're talking like good folk realms type stuff. But there's just something here, monkey see, monkey do, like they tried in the spirit of maybe friendship or collaboration to do something magically that they weren't up to, or actually had less experience bound, didn't want to admit it, which we'll come back to. And then that's kind of led to it didn't work, but not only did it not work, it's led to a direct injustice for somebody else. I'm seeing this word sense being backwards on the card. I don't know whether you can see that. But that may have affected somebody's physical senses, right? If we're going really big with like the sorts of workings and things we're doing, obviously those can lead to health repercussions for those involved or those in the receiving energy of a particular magic, right? So we may have somebody whose senses have been affected or who have subtracted a sense because of what was done to them, for them, or with them, right? And you are burned by this in the way that JC was burned by it in his narrative, right, in the comics. And it is appropriate to bring him up because it's kind of his deck, right? It's Vertigo and he's the fool in this deck and all the rest of it. But it's like you can't let it go in the same way that that character can't let Newcastle go, and that it will forever kind of leave him changed, that he let something happen or that he facilitated something which in reality was out of his control, but it led to somebody being imprisoned in a sort of demonic realm. There may be something on a smaller level that's a bit like that, of like, how could I let this happen? I should have seen that this person was a rookie. I should have seen that it was monkey see, monkey do, and that actually this wouldn't have been done very well, and that's leading to a misdirected will now. I know that's a minority interpretation, but I felt like I had to go into it in full because for some of you that will hit almost exactly, right? And like I say, if not, it's just that something dodgy happened with a friend, maybe that led to an injustice at your end, and it could be completely in your mundane life, but there's something about not letting go of the energy of that that is directly hindering your magical or spiritual progress, to the point where your will is either something you're not willing to direct at the moment in a kingly way, any gender, or is something that is actively being misdirected because of, for instance, an inability to forgive or a seeking of revenge. You may be getting physical shakes because, again, another banger, but the song I'm Shaking is coming on by Little Willie John. Absolutely amazing if you like that sort of era, by the way. You probably can't hear much of it now, but just telling you because it's rad. Okay, so to move to the other side from these kind of shakes and sensory changes and a bit of like, should I become the armchair magician again, just to take a time out with this so that we can function correctly in a ritual sense. We then have more speaking directly to command, right? Read this not as command of other people necessarily, but as command of your particular energetic imprint, your magical faculties, your energies, your energy work, or indeed the world at your command in the kind of Neville Goddard sense of it, right? The I am. If you're instead speaking to like a manifesting and a directing of will. So this day I am embracing nature was in reverse. Get outdoors for at least 30 minutes. Go to the beach, the woods, or the park. Soak up some nature and boost your mood. If any of you are of like a more tradcrafty ilk, or you work with spirits who are directly nature spirits or spirits of the land, there is a calling here to say like, okay, yes, City Magic is a great book and we all enjoy adapting certain paradigms to be more of a chaos magician type thing and expanding the idea of natural versus unnatural in this age where we're acknowledging that, you know, the unnatural or the human made has now birthed other things such as AI that are themselves their own natural autonomous thing. It is great under that landscape and in this kind of age of Aquarius sense to take rituals that were once in physical nature and adapt them to city life or to apartment life or to thug life is what I'm hearing for some of you, and to kind of switcheroo and to like, you know, if an item was once this particular precious metal or this particular herb, to substitute with more digitized things or to just like put in things where relevant that are a bit of a shift. But there is a call here to go back into literal nature in that kind of tradcraft sense, which I think is more expansively speaking about if you've been using a lot of substitutions in your magical practice in order to experiment with that kind of idea of magic as tech rather than as you shall do this in a more dogmatic fashion. There is a calling from spirit, from what you work with, from these fallen angels in particular, to, okay, pause the substitutions, go back to literally casting a circle or opening a compass in the woods, right? Or to literally using the talismanic stuff that you were taught to use for Venus, for Mars, whatever it is, right? Go back to doing things by the book for a little bit. And again, that's not because you're an armchair magician. It's not because you're lacking in practice, as this other infiltrating person may have been doing. It's not because your will is not great or your kingdom is not as great. You know, I'm hearing the end of Labyrinth, right? My will is as strong as my kingdom is as great. And my kingdom is as great, sorry, you have no power over me. You absolutely hold all the power you think you do. You can take back the kingdom. You can take back your magical or spiritual progress. But there is a need here to step beyond like the sort of chaos magic fuckaroo of it and go back to the way people used to do it in order to relearn some deeper truth behind that, right? These correspondences are not just, they're not just coming from an academic take based on the intersections of various religious texts and migrating peoples and therefore Venn diagrams of stories, etc., etc. They're also speaking to an experiential truth and sometimes to entity contracts that are really markedly affected by whether or not you use the right metals, the right substances, whether or not you're in the right spaces, whether or not you use the correct names. And I'm hearing, to go back to the kind of Constantine universe, I'm now hearing Peter Stormare as Satan saying, I do love the old names, right? It's that kind of use the correct term. And now back to Labyrinth, I'm hearing, say your right words, the goblin said, right? So there is a need to go by the book on this, to go back to basics. Maybe that's partly why you're being told to take a pause on the direction of will and go back into recuperation and armchair mode, back to the books, right? Back to, think of Giles going back to the library rather than Buffy going out to the cemetery. It's that sort of take a step back again. It's removal, it's objectivity. Not because you're not a skilled practitioner, because for many of you, this is the most advanced spiritual reading I've done in terms of what your daily practice looks like, right? And check the rest of the channel for other spiritual readings with the tag for magic, by the way. But it's also like, even people at your level need to sometimes step back and go back to basics with it. Go back to your core grimoires, your core texts. Go back to maybe even your like beginning apprentice studies in whatever discipline it is, be it manifestation all the way over to like hard magics is what I want to say. Like the good stuff, right? And just break it down, right? There's a principle like that the Aquarius set will be familiar with, that Joe talks about a lot, which is that like there are lessons built into the apprentice section that are circles that then when you get a little bit more advanced or to a next module or even to sort of like intermediate and then adept section, sorry, not intermediate, but I can't think of the word right now, hit me up in the comments. But these circles kind of become circles upon circles, or they form chains of Venn diagrams. And that it's like the ritual that you do at stage 1 of module 1, or perhaps a little after that, is going to be a loop that you return to in like the 6th module of the intermediate course, and then that you return to again as an adept. Not because you need to learn the basics again, but because there's something about the basics that is now imprinted into consciousness in a deeper, more onion layered kind of a way. And I've always admired that about her writing of that particular course and about that trajectory of studies. And it's true perhaps to a lesser extent for things like Franz Barden's initiation into Hermetics, from which we get some of the more Western ideas in things like The Last Airbender. But there's also like, or the Western take on it, should I say. But there's also something about that that's happening within your practice, whether or not you're from Hermetics, whether or not you're from kind of Eastern practices to do with elemental magics, whether or not you're from Quarrier and related magics kind of in a Eurocentric sense. There's something looping back here, or something imprinting at a higher level again and again on an earlier pattern. And it's time to return to your early magical journals, or your early practice, or your diaries from 10 years ago, or your, I don't know, Oprah shelf on Goodreads from before you really got into the hard stuff, when you were just curious about what Eckhart Tolle had to say, or Tolle, or whatever his name is. You can see that I don't really use him anymore, right? There's something like go back is what I'm saying, right? And I'm sorry if that was a long-winded way to say that, but there's something about the repetition of a particular ritual or magical imprint that's really relevant here. I'm also seeing in my mind's eye, so in the beginning of House of Leaves, and again, you don't have to have read it, but this will resonate if you have, there is a process where someone leaves their house through a window, explores the exterior of the house, comes in, I believe, through a door, and then explores the interior as it relates to the exterior, because, spoiler alert for the book, the interior of the house is very different to what happens at the exterior. And in my copy of House of Leaves, because it's like a literature that invites this, I've kind of turned it into like a mini grimoire of stuff, and I've imprinted it and put extra layers of magical workings in the book for each time I read it. Because it's a place within a place within a place. It's the original kind of liminal space text before the back rooms. So that's really fitting, right? And for this particular section where they crawl out the window and then they go round the house and back in and they realise that the house is fucked, I've done a sigil out of that and made it into a working ceremonial pathway, in the same way that, again, returning to Quarrier, some of the initial rituals that you do are kind of a particular walking around a set of elemental candles, in the same way that like an LBRP would be, where you're going to different directions, you're visiting certain elements and entities, you're opening certain doorways, and then you're returning back in a excuse me, I can't even speak it, in a pattern that is then a form that you will use in other unrelated greater rituals later on, right? So I think the reason I'm seeing that House of Leaves sigil thing is both there's something about spatially, how are you working, right? Because again, we had this opening of the compass. I can't think of the correct verbiage for that. It's not opening, but you know what I mean. Or the laying down of a circle or whatever. But there's also something about like literally where you're walking in a room as to how you do this stuff. That is like, pay attention to that, because it's going to imprint and imprint and imprint and have layers and layers and layers. Or if you've been trying to figure out how to do a certain ritual to something or with something, the answer here is to go back to the initial studies that you did way back when you were a baby witch or a rookie magician or whatever you were. Excuse me. Confirmation again. And look at the patterns that you did in terms of where you were walking, who you were working with, where you thought the elements were then, where you think they're at now, directionally, you know, because like, again, for those who are maybe earlier on the path, there is no correct compass wheel, right? Different places in indigenous America had different ideas about that. Different places in Africa had different ideas about that. In sort of Central and Southern Asia, there was like a whole extra element in that, and different stuff directionally and spirit-wise. And even within Eurocentric magic, where we think of this traditional directional archangelic thing, the positioning of that actually changes a lot. And if you're mapping it to astrology, spoilers for astrology, but there are essentially 3 different versions of that based on whether you're working with cardinal, mutable or fixed energies. So you have 3 different compasses there, which is something I use in my practice. So, you know, use where you're from, use what you're working with. I'm hearing Justin Timberlake, right? Let me see what you're working with. Look at those hips. But it's that kind of, it's like, okay, take what you know about your background and like not adapt to the compass, because we're trying to get away from like adapting things out of tradition, but maybe use the information about who you are, what you work with, where you come from, to click it into a particular pattern, which you will then repeat and which will become a tradition and is in itself somehow traditional. So if you just, for example, resonated with what I said about astrology, and there actually being like 3 directional wheels and not one where, I don't know, we begin in the east with Air and Raphael, kind of in that classic LBRP way, then really look into that. If you identify as an astrologer or someone whose main paradigm is astrology, right? Look at the 3 cardinal, mutable and fixed wheels and start to practice that. Or if that sounds like absolute interpretative chaos magic bollocks to you, and you know that you feel like you resonate more deeply with a Eurocentric directional approach, use that. And again, this doesn't have to be as simple as we're looking at a compass wheel of directions either, because I got that House of Leaves sigil, which is a more complex shape, right? But there's something sigillic or something pattern-based or something about your movement through a space, through a zone, through different planes even, which needs to be a repeat process that is based on like tradition for you and for your allies, that you will then repeat upon itself and work with again and again. The song that's on at the moment is, I think it's TJ Hooker, is it? But it's Forge Your Own Chains anyway. So there is the implication of starting something now which will be the process that you are kind of stuck in moving forward. And stuck is not a bad thing, right? Because if you can be stuck and safe in one particular thing, if you can be stable, if that can be your pentacle, your earthen energy, binding you to like the baseline of what it is you're doing, then the potential for all the other stuff that you eventually reach from that anchor point is much broader, much higher, and much wider, much more interdimensionally rich, right? So this is about laying down traditions for yourself from a place of having had recuperation and research. And it's about beginning everything that you're doing magically as your next step, as if you're going to be doing it for the rest of your magical life. And again, we're speaking about this idea of the persona of the magician that's coming up a lot in this side. Moving from that, narcissistic traits don't make me a full-on narcissist. So here we come to the real crux of the anti-hero, which is where in your magical life does this magician persona that you've got going on either conflict with where you see your higher self to be, or within the archetype, within the richness of that arc, come across as a bit of a dickhead, right? Where are you your John Constantine taking a piss kind of an energy, versus where are you in your most enlightened highest self, your true will embodied, etc. And some of that has to do with the traits of either covert or overt narcissism. So because we got this, I had a quick run over to the bookshelf to grab this highly unmagical text, The Covert Passive Aggressive Narcissist by Debbie Mirza, which is absolutely unmissable if you don't have much of an understanding of what covert narcissism is, but there are shifty people around you, or that you seem to be under some kind of manipulation on the mundane. Highly recommend. That's just for some. But we're going to look at the DSM-4 criteria for narcissistic behaviour, partly because on a variety of channels it's a very misused word, and partly because we want to see that some of these traits can be embodied by someone who doesn't meet all of them. So if we're speaking about whoever this friend was, where there was a betrayal, or if we're speaking about you as your magical highest self, some of this may be relevant. So just listen as I read. So 1, has a grandiose sense of self-importance, e.g. exaggerates achievements and talents, expects to be recognised as superior without commensurate achievement. Doesn't that speak to what I said as an example over here about someone who's maybe like taking on something magically that they couldn't quite do because they wanted to appear a bit more adept to the group, right? But again, that has incredible ethical implications, which if they were at a high level, they would have thought about prior to a ritual, you know, right? 2, is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. I think a lot of our magical aims speak to that, right, as a collective. 3, believes that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people. There might be something going on in this friendship dynamic that's a bit like that, whether it's that this person sought you out initially because you were a magical figure, or that there was something about them wanting to come across magically and therefore doing something that was a dick move. Again, it will resonate differently for different people because large audience, and if it is working for you, please hit the comments, like, subscribe, ding the dong, thank you kindly. Help me to grow the channel to get this out to other magicians, right? 4, requires excessive admiration, which ironic when I just said please like the video, no. 5, has a sense of entitlement, unreasonable expectations of especially favourable treatment or automatic compliance with expectations. That's interesting when we're talking about deity, entity, contract work, etc. and what is expected from both sides, no? 6 is interpersonally exploitative, i.e. takes advantage of others to achieve ends. So where in your practice does like the means the end justify the means, right? And how is that either a good thing or a problem? Again, I'm not coming for you, I'm leaving it up to you to meditate on these things. You can take notes in the comments, feel free. And that's not me being a narcissist and saying, hey, this shit's so good, take notes. That's me saying, I know this reading is very dense with stuff. If you need to come back to it in sections, absolutely do, because I'm just reeling off shit that comes to me like quick fire, and I don't know how much of it is relevant, and it would be interesting for me to see as well. 7, lacks empathy, is unwilling to recognise or identify with the feelings and needs of others. Apply this to the extra human as well as the human, please, because we are all one with the force. 8, is often envious of others or believes that others are envious of him or her, which again could play into this interpersonal dynamic over this end, that you kind of can't let go, and it may relate to the reasons that you can't quite let that go right now. And 9, shows arrogant, haughty behaviours or attitudes, which I think we more typically and stereotypically associate with narcissism on a cultural level, right? Any of those things may be holding you back from being your ideal magician self or identifying with that in order to feel this power and willpower that you once embodied, that we can return to by kind of going to our former selves. And this whole reading is a call back to like, look at where you started out versus where you are, not just to compare in order to feel like you've come a long way, which I feel you have, but also to go back to what was relevant even at the very beginnings of this and what you can carry forward to solve the problems of now and to become your ideal self. Just kind of a side note, if you're ever getting readings on narcissism, you have a great deal of work to do in this life, and I say that in the most positive sense possible. It's like, I'm not gonna like do that trick of like, oh, some souls are more specialer than others, you know, like it's absolute dog shit. Nobody's here as a more ascended higher being than the rest of us, and that's why it's just so hard for you, honey. That's something that people say to sell you shit, and if you haven't seen through that, then this is your rude awakening, sorry. But there is a certain truth to the idea that some people encounter specific certain lessons in the pursuit of greater personal power within a particular lifetime, and therefore greater effect in terms of the capability that they have either to contribute to the universal force or to contribute to the aid of others, right? Depending on how left hand or right hand you fall in your particular spiritual paradigm. You might want to contribute to magic, or you might want to contribute to other people and or the world. If you are encountering issues to do with narcissism, or eradicating narcissistic traits within the self and within particularly the magical identity, then you are in a lifetime right now where that can be dealt with, which indicates that within this particular lifetime there is a great capability for power. It's almost like the reverse of with great power comes great responsibility, right? It's with great responsibility, great working through some really nasty, boggy, hefty shit energetically, some really dense, heavy stuff. There is the capability in this lifetime for great power, great direction of will. And with that, let us turn this the right way up, right? And you can see how much more glorious the imagery becomes. So what I'm not saying is that if you've dealt with narcissism, overt or covert, that you're better than other people, you're more advanced than other people. Again, that's absolute dog shit put out there to sell you something. And I mean, you can book with me, that'd be grand, but I'm not here to sell you on a particular thing. I'm not here to kind of blow smoke up your ass as a spiritual practitioner and say, oh, you're just so special that you had to deal with some real bullshit. What I am saying is that if you're unpacking narcissism within yourself, within your spirituality, within the way that you relate to both the human and the extra human, the normal and the extra normal, the locational and the liminal, then you have power as one of your potentialities in all of those spheres. And now I'm hearing, what is it, this song? It's bloody great. And I do feel like Tarantino would use it if he didn't think he'd get cancelled. It is Concrete Reservation. So again, we're speaking to this idea of adapting one thing for another thing, because this song is kind of about the idea of how being in the projects is like a concrete version of a reservation space. So there's like one culture bleeding into the interpretative meanings of another under oppression. And that may be very relevant for how history relates to your personal magical practice for some of you. But again, it's also speaking to that chaos magic vibe of like taking one thing and making it another thing in a way that is actually quite offensive. And I mean, you can possibly hear in the background, there's like appropriative singing in this song that sounds a little bit like indigenous singing, but in that not so great lens. That is the reason it's in a Tarantino playlist. With a sly wink and a knowledge that, you know, I am a white person making this list, and that comes with its own set of issues, by the way. I'm not oblivious to all of that. It's done with irony. But in this case, it's relevant because there is that, like, okay, well, where is your sly wink? Where is your privilege bias? Where is your perhaps entitlement to a certain set of characteristics, or to a certain understanding, or to the ability to speak freely or make playlists freely about certain things? And where is the rubbing up of history against how those things intersect with each other? There may also be, in this examination, a call for some, and I don't want to trigger others, but for some, there is a call that you already know about to examine colonialism within your personal practice and the narcissism of colonialism in order to unlock your power, your will, etc. Right. Finally into the tarot for this section, and then we will pull a couple more cards, but not for very long because I do need to be leaving the house soon. So we got a Page of Wands reversed, a Ten of Pentacles reversed, a Seven of Pentacles. I think these two are speaking to the idea that we are doing a reassessment of things, based on what it is that we define as our magical legacy and where our baseline pattern point is, right? Again, it's this pentacle over the third eye. So it's this idea of imprinting space with certain structures, whether they be sigils, the way we're moving through a space, directional attributions, yada, yada, you do you, boo. But the Page of Wands is interesting because it's almost like a... Page of Wands is very much like the rookie magician energy to me. It's the starting scholar of these kinds of arts. It's the person first taking their steps into the spirit world, but not yet at the level of a knight, which is like, I guess, apprentice, and all the way over to a king, which would be someone who has kind of magical, not magical mastery, because arguably none of us get there, but you know, is the most capable one can be generationally within a lifetime. So again, this is like a reversal or a retrograde of where it is that you started out. Now, retrogrades, in my personal understanding, and I am a trainee professional astrologer, but the way I like to look at them is through the lens of people like Caroline Casey, who say that it's a spend more time with me energy. It's not necessarily like, you know, Mercury retrograde isn't Mercury in reverse. It's not Mercury in its bad mode, or it's it's not like I'm hearing like Billie Eilish bad guy energy. It's not Mercury in its like, ooh, edgelord, wow, kind of a zone. It's Mercury saying, I'm in retrograde. That means that in the illusion space of how I look to you, I'm standing still saying, are you going to come over or what? Are you going to talk to me or what? Are you going to spend a deeper time with me or what? Some of the drums in this song sound like a glitch, so there is that Mercury retrograde space. You might be watching this in a future Mercury retrograde, or a retrograde kind of within your transits or something being activated. But it's that thing of like, come closer. We have time to spend together. We have a zone within which to enter into a dialogue. It's retrograde in the sense of, I'm standing here waiting, are you going to come or not? And that's particularly from the perspective of the Earth, because if you're not astrologically minded, by the way, retrogrades aren't a real thing. It's to do with the way that we see orbits as a planet, ourselves moving in our own way. So it's very much, again, entering into the liminal when something is stationary or retrograde, because it's this thing of like, it looks that way, but it kind of isn't. It's almost like the colour magenta, right? It looks magenta because the brain processes that there must be something doing that in the cones between red and violet, but actually those don't exist in the way we see. So it's this imaginal space, which is why magenta is the colour out of space. And you can think of stationary and retrograde as the kind of planet out of space, or the hey, can we take a pause and just like shut down the rest of this room and take a dialogue together. It makes me think of, for those who've seen all the way through Mr. Robot, that zone where like Child Angela is in the weird room and it's all being recorded and there's like a copy of Lolita on the table and it's all very, you know what I mean? It's like that. It's like a planet has stepped into that. Or in this case, it's like your younger self, your rookie magician self has stepped into that space in order to sit at a table with you and say, hey, can we have a chat? Like, can we play this game, right? Because there was like, I forget what it was called. Please remind me in the comments if you remember. But there was that kind of choose your own adventure style, like old Acorn style game going on there as well. I can't remember what console it was on, but anyway, I'm digressing, which may be something you found yourself magically prone to do lately. And again, this is why back to basics, go out into nature, do things where they're meant to be done, use the materials that are meant to be used, spend more time with the forces, with the energies that are meant to have time spent with them, right? Let's get 3 further cards just with like a bit of future direction for you. I'm being called to get this. Oh, okay, and that. Okay, look at your attitudes to love relationships in this. Because the Ace of Cups is neither in reverse or upright. It's neither in retrograde or in true, right? So there's something if there is like a weird thing with this pattern, with this friendship, it's like that is itself an imprinting pattern in all of your relationships that needs to be examined before you move forward and into your power. And then we've got 7 of Swords in reverse, so not everybody is a sneaky bugger, and that needs to be in your awareness, I guess. Is this correct? Yeah. Queen of Cups in reverse, that's interesting, isn't it? I think of Queen of Cups as transubstantiation because of the Smith-Waite imagery. I know that's not for everyone. I know a lot of you in a magical reading will hear something Christian and kind of cross and spit and turn around 3 times or whatever, or summon in your demons directly, right? But there's something to that. What is that? Is that for the next section? Right. We're going to go into what this Queen of Cups is in the next portion of your reading, which I suspect you're sticking around for, since you are magical, because today we're going to be using, for our spicy divination section of extra stuff, we'll be exploring pendulum, right? Partly because, as I say, I need to get out of the house pretty soon for an in-person read. So, let's put her down here. And then where are you? Oh, you're here. I know that it's not a technical pendulum, but I also know that most of you know what this is enough to not care. It's a blunt crystal, it's a rose quartz. The correspondence means nothing, but this is my working pendulum right now. Please forgive me if I act a little strange, okay? Okay, right. Show me yes. Nice and straightforward. Stop, search. Show me no. Okay. Thank you. Is this Queen of Cups a signifier for the querent or for the magician? Yes. Couldn't get it right is coming on in the background. The Fun Loving Criminals cover version. So that may be relevant in terms of like there's something that you felt you couldn't get right with this, or that you have had trouble getting the technicalities of practice right again. And this is why, like, not we're in time out, although there is another reading for that on the channel if you feel drawn to it. But this is why there is a pause and a going back to things. Okay, so Queen of Cups reversed. Is this magical person that we're reading for now blocked, like directly? Are they in time out in some? Yeah, okay. So that's actually a negation of what I just said. You are in a kind of magical timeout. It is enforced from the outside, but not necessarily in a punitive way. It's just like, please take a rest. Please loop back on yourself. Okay. I'm just going to go with the questions that immediately come to mind. In this person's magical development, do they need to look to their personal history and ancestry at this time? No, so it's not directly to do with lineage, which was my first thought with this being blood as well. Okay, so Queen of Cups, transubstantiation reversed. Is the person I'm reading for trying to create material result from non-material means? I mean, yes, because they're, yeah, I mean, that's obvious, yes, because they're a magical person. Is there a component of making non-material result from material means involved in the next most important working? Yeah, so we're talking moving in the physical, we're talking talismanic. Oh, but it's spinning as well. So it's like, yes, but with a caveat. So if you felt drawn to material magics, making non-material results, as opposed to things like visualization and manifestation making material results, then there's a confirmation, yes, but it's also like it's happening a different way from how it normally happens. And this is moving widdershins. So there is something counterintuitive to how you normally work that is coming about from this. And you see how starkly it's moving. That is, you know, it's quite a big movement from this pendulum. It's more than the yes or the no was. So there is really a point being made by Spirit here of don't go the way you would normally go, right? Turn back, retrace steps, look at the patterning so far, and make a new road in a counterintuitive fashion, but that also takes forward tradition with it. Stop. Thank you. Search. Stop saying yes, just search. Thank you. Is there a feminine involved in this because it's Queen of Cups? No. So it doesn't have to, I mean, you could be a feminine, but this isn't really describing a person so much as a process. Okay. I'm now looking at, because we mentioned JC, the other JC, I'm now looking at my Hellblazer shelf and I'm seeing all his engines. Hold up while I just grab that copy because I think there's something to this. Wait a sec. Okay guys, I'm back with all his engines, right? And I've just asked the pendulum off cam whether we want to go, I say off cam because I didn't have my mic in place, sorry about that. But whether we want to go through the book looking for something in particular, that's a yes. We may be here a while, but I'm going to start asking, like, is it this section? And sort of finding the page that we need to see, because I think there's something in this and in all the conversation in this reading about Hellblazer that is significant in some way to this Queen of Cups for you. So is it this section? I'm already seeing a no, right? Just give me a yes whenever we get there. I know I'm going backwards through a comic you may not have read. Spoilers. Oh, is this it? No, okay. Pendulum, you don't have to agree with me, you're just finding the page, all right? Let's not get too complex with this conversation. Yes. Is this yes? Is it this? Is it the next page? No. Is it this page? Yes, it's this double page spread, okay. Stop. Stop and search, please. Show me left hand. Okay. Stop. Show me right hand. Stop. Search. Are we looking to the left or to the right? Okay, thank you. Right. Let us then add a bit of bibliomancy and read this left-hand page, and we'll return to pendulum in a moment if we need to. Now the sleepers will awaken and some will go mad, but most will convince themselves that the terror and the agony were merely dreams. Yeah, everything's coming up big red roses. So here's how the script goes now, right? We shake hands, we wipe away a sentimental tear, and you piss off back to the funeral home. I have set my mark on her. I do not give back what I have taken. Well then, I'm going to have to kill you, Mr. Death. Ooh, that's interesting, isn't it? Right, I'm just going to do a quick, I don't even know whether this will be in focus, but we're just going to kind of scroll the page here so that if you do want to check out any of the details of this that might be significant, this is your particular page. So we have JC threatening to kill Death, right? And I can't remember the context of this because it's been a while since I read it. But the sleepers will awaken may be relevant, particularly if you're anybody who uses like Ben and Gesserit type stuff in a chaos magical context. But there's also something about some people will wake up, some people will go mad. This speaks to the magical collective in a more broad way, right? Most will convince themselves that the terror and the agony were merely dreams. So there's something here about like what we were saying with the ideas of yourself as the ideal or future magician self, and how that relates to like whether or not you consider that that is a dream, or whether it's like you dreaming the future into reality. And the song that's come on, which again, if I do say so myself, excellent cringy Tarantino pick, is Teach Me Tiger by April Stevens, is it, or something? But it's very sort of like, oh, teach me how you do things, wah, 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 right? It's very like, I mean, it's a woman basically asking for instruction on how to have sex, but in a very, very sort of 70s cheesy fashion. I won't recommend it, but it's interesting. And again, it's like, teach me, Tiger, how to be this more saucy future self, this more lusty magician energy, this more charismatic, adept future possibility for my own spirituality. Now, again, the energy of this carries a bit of risk of like focus of results magic rather than focus of furthering humanity. But again, you do you. I'm just pointing it out while it's here. But there is something about like, don't let your dreaming of future potentialities for yourself, excuse me, hiccups confirmation, be seen as just dreaming. You can reach the capabilities that you dreamt about in both the positive and the negative senses, right? And spoilers, like on the next page that I've just sort of caught, is that this death person that needs to be killed is themselves a god. So there's like, there is at one extreme end, ideal magician, enlightened being, ascended master energy. And then at the other end, there is like a godhead that needs to be killed, right? And either potentiality is possible for you as a spiritual being. I know that's a bit big for this channel, but it's coming through. And again, we were talking about transubstantiation, right? So the alchemical process of cannibalism by which Catholicism renders its God state passing into a receiving state from its practitioners of like disciple energy. And I know that that's very like, sorry to my Christian syncretists, or other Christian syncretists, should I say, if that's like a vast dumbing down of the concept, but there's something to that of like looking at the relationship between the material and the literally holy in a new fashion and in a bigger way, a much bigger way. This is very huge energy, right? I'm almost like reluctant to put this out there because I'm not sure that it's like the existing mood for my channel, but I kind of want to believe it is because I like you guys. Anyway, okay, so usual Constantine, sarcasm. We shake hands, we wipe away a sentimental tear and piss off back to the funeral home. But I'm going to have to kill you, Mr. Death, because they have set their mark on something. So again, if you're doing pattern imprinting, sigillic magic, talismanic marks, or you are entering into contracts, particularly with energies that are not fully benefic or are not like enlightened donor energies, be careful about marks made, agreements formed, etc. The Queen of Cups wants to come back into this. There's something here about emotions entering into practice as well that is to do with what we said about like letting go of whatever happened with this friendship thing, whatever happened with your Newcastle, right? For those who are familiar with this mythology. There's also like, it's interesting that killing death has come up in your comic, but death reversed came up on the recuperation side of your practice. So there's something to that. Is that like, let me get my elbow down for this and then it's slightly more unbiased from a kind of micro movement perspective. Okay, so show me yes. Stop. Show me no. Stop. Thank you. Let me just think. So for this Queen energy with the death reversed, is this an emotional resistance to something that needs to be released, that is blocking progress? No. Okay, cool, good. We like this. It's leaving me a bit like, I don't know what to ask from my end. But yes, you're agreeing with me, thank you. That's very scathing of you, Cheers Spirit. Okay, so it's not an emotional release thing. Killing death. killing the impulse to release emotionally, or killing the, oh, is this a cyclical patterning thing of constantly releasing and not directing will? We got there. We got to the crux of it, fam. Right, that may be the last question I ask with this then, but you can sit there just in case. Okay, so we have decoded finally this side of the reading down here, which, as you may remember, was this kind of justice reversed relationship with a Three of Cups, a friend, and then a death reversed. It's not that this circumstance or thing needs letting go in your energy in order that you negate any narcissistic traits within yourself in order to do whatever this work is, right? And it will differ. It's the impulse to be constantly releasing, constantly healing itself that needs to be healed. And part of your reconnection back, we got there eventually, guys, to going to your rookie magician stages, your early, maybe even the stages that, you know, like me, where you were inspired by things like comics, and you were kind of learning the ropes of magic. It's going back there, not to correct for later mistakes or something kind of more punitive in energy, but to look at how your magical modality has gone from an understanding of power and energy dynamics over to an understanding of healing and energy dynamics, with the emphasis becoming about fixing yourself, and therefore about seeing yourself as broken, which prohibits you from being Godhead. It puts you into the meat person receiving the transubstantiation in church instead of the Jesus energy coming through the bread and wine. Do you feel me? Bloody hell. I might even put a timestamp to skip to the kind of resultant energy of the reading, because it took us a while to get there, didn't it? But that's kind of the point, right? Because we're talking about all this repeat patterning, all this things imprinting back on themselves, and where to refer to tradition and where not to, and who to involve in things and who not to involve, and whether or not you carry traits that you don't like in other people coming forward, and all this. And part of the reason you had to ruminate on that, other than to gain your particular sets of confirmations and stuff for what I'm reading overall, and your particular nuances of ritual, which I hope you have gained from this reading, part of it was just to be like in that long, arduous, annoying process of like, but what is she really getting at? Because that's where your healing has taken you. You've been over-healing, my dude. Or you've been over-focusing on being the solution to a problem that perhaps has dissolved within your magical practice. So it's like all of this energy that I was like a bit sort of about within the reading of, is this too much of an emphasis on results magic, on magic that brings about a certain thing within the world rather than magic that brings about enlightenment, on like petty dynamics to do with narcissists and friends and whether a coven's working well together, and on media influences on magic like comics, like movies, all of this sort of stuff. But we had to go through all of that stuff to say, actually, your emphasis used to be there and it brought you power. It brought you into the Leonic direction of willing things to be. You were capable of killing death in that sense, right? Don't go and kill death, that would be awful. But you know what I mean? You were working with gods as a god in the making. And I think that somewhere along the lines in healing modalities, healing circles, particularly divination circles, if you watch a lot of readings, you have identified with something that needs to be healed rather than something that does the healing work for others. You have become the project rather than the god. And that is what you needed to take from this overall. And that may be, you know, what I put in the thing that I call it. But I think you needed the whole reading to get to that space. And to say, like, this has been a long and strangled route between command and recuperation, between 59 and 69, between Vapula and Stolas, to get to a point where I go back to my roots and I think, what am I doing magic for? Right? And it wasn't initially to fix yourself. The vision was grander than that. It was more nuanced. It was more complex. It brought in the trajectories of other beings in a slightly different way, right? You're not just here to be fixed. You're not a problem. Everything's coming up big red roses. So here's how the script goes now, right? We shake hands, we wipe away a sentimental tear about how we used to be, and we piss off back to the funeral home to do our best work, to do the work of someone who is becoming a god and not becoming a normal human, right? We're not aspiring to integration anymore. We're aspiring to adepthood. Do with that what you will, guys. I really do need to go. I hope that was a useful and kind of nuanced and multi-layered reading for you. If it was or it wasn't, please hit me up in the comments with some feedback. If you did enjoy it, please like, subscribe, ding the dong, thank you kindly. There'll be more of this kind of chaos going on the channel, but I do read for a variety of mundane things as well as spiritual things. So if you want more of a kind of day-to-day reading, please check out the A to Z Lucky Dip playlist, or indeed the full shuffle playlist of the entire channel elsewhere on the stream. And yeah, I mean, let me know, please, the area in which you're working, or the kinds of things you're thinking of working on, or how this hit. Partly because I'm just so nosy and I want to know. This has been a really interesting reading for me to do. It's a really unique energy to tap into that isn't like what I normally work with here. And I really hope that that means that a lot of people are drawn into this. But if you do want to help me spread the word as a small channel with a big mission, you know what to do. And yeah, I'm not even going to like do my usual good luck thing. I'm just going to say, Godspeed.